So this caused a little confusion at Christmas about which Tommy was which. But as we grew up, we would ride horses. We had the best thoroughbreds in the country. My father operated a very successful stable and a horse racing business. If you've ever been to Commonwealth Stadium, that was his horse ranch. He had some of the best horse traders in the country. It was a perfect life for a child growing up, riding, learning to shoot. We were a very close family. My mother would take me to my grandfather's and I would play with blocks on the floor while he would carry on business conversations with Henry Clay, the great compromiser, and John Breckinridge, the Vice President of the United States. As small children, as most families in the South, we had a mammy, and her name was Aunt Betty, and we loved Aunt Betty as much as we did our own mother. Aunt Betty taught us to read and write and taught us ciphering. Later, my father would take over and teach us business principles. As we grew up, we began to expand our farming operations. My childhood friend Sanders Bruce and I actually went into business. We started a hemp manufacturing business. 1848, my grandfather died, leaving a vast estate to my mother, a large population of slaves. Father Calvin didn't believe in slavery, so he immediately wrote out freeman papers for all the hunt slaves. Called them together, began to give the papers. They were noticeably upset. Finally, Aunt Betty speaks up. She says, "Mr. Cal, you know free people can't stay in Kentucky over 30 days. Why do you want us all to leave?" Realizing what he had done, he told them they could live out their lives on hunt estates and continue as they had, but they were welcome to leave at any time they wished. So, as our people began to become more populous, we built a hemp factory, made clothing. It was run almost entirely by former slaves who were living on hunt-worthy properties. Sanders Bruce and I joined together and started a local militia company, the Lexington Rifles. Our business prospered and the winds of war started to blow in Mexico once more. I went off to Mexico. Didn't do much fighting, mostly fought mosquitoes. Came home, business was good. Began to notice Sanders' little sister Becky. Becky and I were married. She gave birth to our stillborn son. She had an embolism in her leg. She suffered in bed for over a year, passing away in 1861. By this time, Sanders had taken up with the Union cause, and I cast my lot being a businessman with the Southern Confederacy. The governor had ordered the Lexington Rifles to send our guns to the Capitol. We took the rifles out of the crates, filled them with bricks, sent them on to the governor, put the rifles in a load of hay, and sent them south. A group of us left Lexington, Kentucky, on some of the best Kentucky thoroughbreds there was, and we were all blue bloods, and we were going to fight. I only made it back to Lexington a couple times. One time I really felt the need to see my mother. I always enjoyed riding up to Union soldiers with my blue Union overcoat and good horse. So this night I went into town by myself, riding quietly up the street. The Union Army had a camp in Grants Park. It was close to that wall from my mom's house, so they could keep an eye on her. She had a son that was a Confederate general, 4 other sons that were Confederate officers, and 2 son-in-laws that were Confederate generals. So they were keeping an eye on me. I was riding up the street. They didn't seem to pay much attention. As I got to the gate of the house, I heard quite a bit of wrestling behind me. One of the servants to open the door, he recognized my silhouette. He said, "Quickly, Mr. John, through here." So I actually rode my horse into the house, startled my mother, who was in the parlor, and she jumped up. I quickly kissed her on the forehead and said, "Mother, I love you." And this was interrupted by the same servant opening the side door and said, "Quickly, Master John, out this way." So I quickly rode off into the darkness. That was the last time that I saw my mother. My brother Tommy was killed at Bardstown. He was buried in a flower garden. My brother-in-law, A.P. Hill, was killed in the last couple of days of war at Petersburg. And I lie here with my life's blood saturating the soils of Greeneville. Some say over the years, I do know that making her clean my body, help put on nice clothes. She didn't want the family seeing me that way. I was taken to Abington, where my lovely wife Maddie was. Had a funeral which over 10,000 people came. Taken to Sinking Springs Cemetery, put in the above ground vault. Was there 2 weeks removed and taken to Richmond, Virginia for a state funeral. While there, so many women came and brought stems of flowers that actually covered the coffin. From there, I was taken to Hollywood Cemetery and placed in the grave of a one W.W. Donovan. There I was laid till 1868, when my mama told son Richard and son-in-law Basil Duke, "It's time for the boys to come home." We were just interned, had a funeral. Again, over 10,000 men attended the funeral. Many of my men was there, and they formed the Morgan's Men Association, which is the oldest Civil War organization that's still in existence to this day. A few years later, Aunt Betty passed away. I never will forget the excitement. I had sent her some red shoes when we were on the Ohio raid. She was always excited over those red shoes. But as Aunt Betty lay dying, she was asked her final wish. She said, "Very hard to keep an eye on those boys." So if you go to the Hunt Morgan plot today, the Hunts are in the center. The children are buried in a circle. The grandchildren in an outer circle. The other family members in the third circle. But in the circle, very crossways, facing those boys, is Aunt Betty. She's still keeping an eye on them today. 6 months after my death, Maddie gave birth to a young girl. Her name was John Hunt Morgan. She lived to be 23. And she unfortunately passed away. I hope this gives you an overview of the life of John Hunt Morgan. A couple out here said they want to hear ghost stories, and last night I told them. During the early 1900s, an epidemic was going around taking children's lives. The Morgan family was still living at Hopemont, and a young child had taken seriously ill. The Morgans had hired a nurse to stay with the child. She left the room, came back, she opened the door, she saw an older black lady with red shoes sitting in a chair beside the child. Startled, she ran downstairs to get them in. They came back and didn't see anything. The next morning, the child was dead. But the ladies of the house found relief because they knew Aunt Betty had come to take that child home.
Our next storyteller began her life as a slave in the Dixon Williams mansion just behind us. She helped to clean and dress the body of General Morgan when he died. She was a well-respected and beloved community member, and she lived an incredibly long life. Please welcome Aunt Minerva Clem.
Oh, when the saints come marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, I want to be in that number. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Listen, I had a dear old mother. She's gone long before. Yes, I promised her that I'm gonna meet her in the sky. Oh, when the saints go marching in. I've been a faithful servant for the Lord for a mighty long time. I've been a faithful wife, faithful servant to my community, and a faithful servant to my friends. You know, the year's 1917, and I'm 84 years old, and it's time to lay this old body down. Yeah, when you get to be my age and you realize that you're to the end, you start thinking about things. You know, it's almost been 50 years that I was a different kind of servant. Ain't talked about it too much, but I was. You see, I was born a slave. Something happened when I was a slave. I call it that horrid night. I don't talk about it too much. Wasn't no use of pouring salt in no wounds, you know. It's just too painful to bear. No one talked about it, but I was there. I was there that horrid night. I was interviewed by different local newspapers, and each time I told the story, I felt confident that I'd done the right thing, or at least the only honorable thing I could have done. And poor old Miss Catherine, she wasn't ever the same after that. Shortly after that horrid night, the slavery was over, and we were all free to go. She said she'd try to do right, had done right by all her slaves, and I agreed that she had. You see, I'd been with Miss Catherine all my life. I remember the day we said goodbye. She couldn't stay here after that horrid night. She sold the mansion, and she moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, with her son and her other relatives. The next time I seen Miss Catherine, which was almost 6 short years after that horrid night, it was at her funeral. I think she grieved herself to death. She blamed herself for what happened. You know, Miss Catherine was a sweet lady, and we buried her over there in Oak Grove Cemetery with all of the rest of her family. My name is Frances Minerva Clem. I was born June the 20th, 1834. I was the slave maid of Catherine Dixon Williams. Miss Catherine's father, Mr. William Dixon, he was Greeneville's first postmaster for many, many years. He was a direct immigrant from Ireland. Miss Catherine was an only child. They adored her so much. And when it came time for her to go to school, she went to the finest schools in the Carolinas. That's where she met Master Alexander Williams. Fine man. He was a doctor, you know. He came from an aristocratic family, descendants of King Mountain. Her father adored her so much that in 1821, he promised her that he was going to build her the finest mansion this side of the Mississippi. Oh yeah, it took 2 years to complete. It had the best of everything. The mansion had mahogany wood to cedar to local pine. the wallpaper, and the staircase, it was something to see. But the most magnificent part of the mansion was on the outside. It was the garden. It had every beautiful flower imagined, and everything was planted in harmonious season where you could just go out and just look. The water to the fountains, everything was properly planted. Us slaves, we were there too. We helped. Everybody helped. I don't know or recall when the mansion got its name, but somehow it was called the showplace of the time. That was the name that it was given, and that was the name that stuck. We had important guests come stay at the mansion. Guests like Davy Crockett, even U.S. presidents like James K. Polk, Andrew Jackson, and the great compromiser himself once stayed at the mansion. My, those were fun days indeed. Such lovely times. But then things began to change, you see. Master Alexander Williams' untimely death in 1857 kind of changed things. And then, around 1861, the mansion started having different kind of guests. Soldiers, Union and Confederate alike. You see, Miss Catherine thought that it would be a good idea to use the mansion as a hotel and serve both Union and Confederate. Well, I thought it sounded like a good idea at the time. We could have used the money. Miss Catherine assured that nothing would happen, and why not? She had 3 sons. 2 fought for the Union, and 1 fought for the Confederacy. Things went fine for a while. But on September the 3rd, 1864, things changed. You know, as slaves, we have a third eye. We have a sense of seeing trouble. I guess our very lives depend on that. I didn't feel right that day. I can remember. I was only 30 years old, but I can remember it like it was yesterday. The first sign, it was raining cats and dogs. I'll never forget. It was dark, it was gloomy, it was cold, and it was just the most unusual rain. Didn't feel good, didn't feel right. And then something else happened. During supper, I remembered something that Miss Lucy had said to me. Oh, I didn't tell you who Miss Lucy was. Miss Lucy was Mrs. Catherine's daughter-in-law. Her name was Mrs. Lucy Rambo. She excused herself right before the rain set in. She said she wanted to go to Uncle George's. You see, we had another farmhouse about 13 miles outside of Greeneville called College Farm. That's where we got all our fruits and our vegetables. She excused herself to go with Uncle George, said she thought she might want to help pick watermelons. Well, you know, since this war's broke out, us women folk, we've had a hard time. Really no men folk to help. Uncle George, when things, got short of food, he would come and bring things that were in season. So I thought, poor child, she probably could use a break. But it seemed kind of odd. Should have known. That was a peculiar sign. Oh, I was tired after dinner, and seems like I had just blown out the candlelight, when all of a sudden, I heard a lot of commotion, a lot of running and fighting, and Miss Catherine screaming. I went to the garden, and I heard someone say, "Halt, halt." Only if Mr. Morgan would have halted, but he kept going. I found out later he'd been a prisoner of war in Ohio and said he'd never be taken alive. Perhaps that's why he didn't halt. But that night, in that moment, that garden lost all its fame and all its glory, because right there is where they shot him down. It was awful. It was awful. Miss Catherine screaming and crying. I didn't see his body till the next day. It was torn apart. It was a pitiful sight. Union troops came in, they searched the mansion, they took what they wanted to take. I had a brand new pair of shoes that cost $100. I didn't want them to take my shoes, my brand new shoes. But they took them anyway. Oh, that was a horrible time. But when I seen Mr. poor old General John Hunt Morgan's body like that, I thought about, what if I had children? All this fighting. They say it's over me, over freedom. I've never seen such ugly things people do to each other. Brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor. It was horrible. Finally, I got up enough nerve. No one should have to see their child like that. I washed the body properly, did the best I could. We put him on a train right up here on Depot Street. And we sent him to Abington, Virginia. Those were sad days indeed. Sad, sad days indeed. But we got through. I found Aunt Minerva when we were restorating Wesley Cemetery. I can't say that I actually found her. I'm going to talk about Miss Louise Orr, the late Miss Louise Orr. She was my friend. And when I found Aunt Minerva's story, I called her first because if I wanted to know if something was true in Greeneville, her being the last one left, she'd be the first person. She was the first person I called, and I told her and I read it to her because Aunt Minerva's story was featured in the Searchlight. And I read her the story, and she says, Minerva Clem. Well, I had a picture of her making apple butter with my great-grandfather, James Robinson. She said, it was in the Pioneer. She says, you come to the Genealogy Center, and I'll have a copy for you. And she did. So when I read that Aunt Minerva was a slave that had a pair of shoes that cost $100, that wasn't the ideal that I thought slaveries had. That was important to me. And then there was something else important. Whatever happened to General John Hunt Morgan died with those three women. Miss Lucy Rambo got the bulk of it. When Miss Catherine moved to Knoxville, Lucy tried to go. For some reason, the marriage didn't work with her son. She was so ostracized that she left Knoxville to go to Fort Worth, Texas. And she died in and out of an insane asylum. Nobody won here. Aunt Minerva was the only one left here, and she was here until 1917. What actually happened died with those three women. We can all speculate what happened, but no one really knows. But I'm telling you, the bond that those three women had and shared couldn't be shakeable. My name is Crystal Montgomery. God bless y'all.
We've got a real treat for you to conclude our program. Joe Kilday is here to sing Greeneville Girl, which is based on the murder ballad Knoxville Girl, which was made popular about 70 years ago by the Lovin' Brothers. Please welcome Joe Kilday.
Thank you.
I met a little girl in Greeneville, a town we all know well. And every Sunday evening, out in her home we dwell. We went to take an evening walk about a mile from town. I picked a stick up off the ground and knocked that fair girl down. She fell down on her bended knees, for mercy she did cry. Oh, Willie dear, don't kill me here, I'm unprepared to die. She never spoke another word, I only beat her more, until the ground around me with her red blood did pour. I took her by her golden curls, dragged her round and round, and threw her into the river that flows through Greeneville town. Go down, you Greeneville girl with dark and roving eyes. Go down, you Greeneville girl, you can never be my bride. I started back to Greeneville, got there around midnight. My mother, she was worried and woke up in the fright, saying, dear son, what have you done to bloody your clothes so? I told my anxious mother I'd been bleeding at my nose. I called for me a candle to light myself to bed. I called for me a handkerchief to bind my aching head. I rolled and tumbled the whole night through, such visions were for me. Black flames of hell around my bed and in my eyes did see. They carried me down to Greeneville and put me in a cell. Though friends they tried to get me out, but none could go my bail. Now I'm here to waste my life away down in this dirty old jail, because I murdered that Greeneville girl, the girl I love so well. Thank you very much.
At this point, I would like to invite all of our storytellers to join me up here on the stage. As they are making their way up here, let's give a round of applause for Jason Moore, who organized this event. Thank you, Jason. What you have seen tonight is a wonderful example of the strength of our past, and it exemplifies the character that exists in Greene County and in Greeneville. The people of Greene County are my people. Shoulder to shoulder we stand to face the past, the present, and the future in a world of fear, confusion, and challenges. Thank you, good comrades, for our golden yesterday and the shining faith I have in tomorrow. Thank you.